Hello, mates. Welcome to Budgie Gaming. I'm your host, Finley. I'm not sure if you heard the news, but the reviews for the Switch 2's version of Dispatch have come out today, and my god, is it some awful news. And no, it's not because of the actual game. From my understanding, it is one of the best games that came out last year. The issue is with the Nintendo Switch 2 version itself. To put it plain and simple, Nintendo decided to massively censor quite a bit from the game. Now, I want to give credit, particularly to the channels Switch Up and Nintendo Life, for their amazing reviews, which is where I got a lot of my info from. I'm going to go over what they've said about the Switch 2 version of the game when compared to the PC and PS5 version of the game. After that, I want to give my own opinions on the entire situation, along with pointing out what a hypocritical bullshit move this is on Nintendo's part. And lastly, I'll talk about what can be done to hopefully put a stop to games being censored. This is all going to be time-stamped in case you already know everything that has happened with Dispatch, and you just want to skip to my opinions and how to fight censorship. Basically, on the PC and PS5 version, Dispatch offers the player the option to either play the game as it is intended to be played, or allow the player to censor the game itself if said player isn't comfortable with nudity or obscene hand gestures. The Switch 2 version, however, doesn't give the player this option. They automatically censor the game for you. YouTubers Switch Up stated that all nudity is censored out with massive black boxes. Nintendo Life points out that very mild things, such as giving someone the finger and moaning during a sex scene, are also censored. Apparently, there are even more sounds that are censored out during this scene, which actually affects the scene in a negative way from a story perspective, which is the last thing anyone wants from a game that heavily relies on storytelling. This game is from the same team who worked on Telltale's series, such as The Walking Dead and The Wolf Among Us. If you played any of those games, you know exactly how the stories carry these types of games. Now, in case you couldn't tell, I absolutely oppose the censorship Nintendo placed on Dispatch. I am also in no shape or form in favor of censorship when it comes to content as harmless as what's depicted in Dispatch. As a matter of fact, I oppose any sort of censorship that restricts artistic expression, whether it's books, movies, music, or video games. I already know there will be some saying, you just want to see some dicks and tits, which I always find to be a weird argument. Like, that's really what you think it comes down to. You don't think it has more to do with the fact that the artist isn't able to convey the story, messaging, feelings, or humor the way they intended you to censorship, especially when it comes to pivotal scenes, such as the sex scene in Dispatch. I would also like to point out a very important point that Switch Up pointed out, which is that there is a rating system put in place for a reason. Why are we censoring games that are strictly intended for adult audiences to begin with? Not only is it perfectly clear that this game isn't for children, but as a collective group, when did everyone decide that sexual content and nudity was worse than violence? It is extremely rare for a game to get banned for its violence, but slap on some sexual jokes and nudity and companies are screaming, "Holy shit, take this down!" I mean, we have Resident Evil 9 releasing in less than a month, where you get to use a chainsaw to cut up zombies. And maybe people? I'm not exactly sure about slicing up people since I've been avoiding trailers to avoid spoilers. But the point is, why aren't violent games facing the same consequences as games with sexual content? And I'm not advocating for Resident Evil 9 or any other violent game to face censorship or being banned. I'm just trying to find out why people are so uncomfortable with something as natural as sex and nudity, but they're absolutely fine with cutting and gunning down characters, which is far from a natural feeling. I just don't understand the logic behind these thoughts. If we're being totally honest about the situation, everyone is eventually going to see a dick or boobs in person. Most people won't see someone getting their head cut off in person. So why do so many people act uncomfortable with the subject matter they'll actually be dealing with in real life? And while we're on the topic on shit that doesn't make any sense, let's talk about the hypocrisy behind Nintendo's decision to censor this game. They allowed nudity in The Witcher 3. They allowed nudity in Red Dead Redemption. They allowed nudity in Cyberpunk 2077, all games that depicted realistic nudity, but they decide to censor the game that is clearly more illustrated rather than realistic. Speaking of illustrated nudity, let's not forget the shit ton of trashy hentai games that clutter the eShop. While counting games and game bundles, there are nearly 200 variations of hentai games cluttering up the eShop. 66 of these games are rated M. And while I didn't click on all of these, every M-rated game I clicked on was rated M for, you guessed it, full-on nudity. So when looking at the big picture, there is no good reason as to why Nintendo would censor Dispatch. My first thought was maybe larger game companies were paying Nintendo off to allow nudity in their games, but that argument falls through when there are hundreds of shovelware hentai games that are allowed to have nudity. My other thought was that maybe they're okay with realistic nudity but don't want cartoon nudity, which would be weird. But again, they allow hentai games on the platform without any censorship, which is clearly cartoonish nudity. So why censor Dispatch? It makes absolutely no sense. And just a quick side note, but I saw a few comments blaming Dispatch, saying they're trying to make Nintendo look bad so they censored the game themselves. All I gotta say to people like that is get off of Nintendo's dick. Because you're looking like a massive fanboy and, quite frankly, just plain stupid. The last thing I want to talk about is what can we do as gamers to prevent this from happening again? Well, a good start is not buying this game from the eShop if you already pre-ordered the game. I've seen people having luck with getting a refund by saying the game was falsely advertised, since nothing was mentioned about censorship in the game description. Another thing you can do is to call and email Nintendo to let them know why you won't be buying the game from their system, and also let them know you'll be buying it elsewhere if you plan to do so. I think another thing people really need to start being careful with is pre-ordering games. And if I'm being brutally honest with everyone, there really isn't a reason to pre-order games anymore, especially if it is digital. I saw some comments mention that there was a 10% discount on this game if you pre-ordered it. But was it really worth saving $3 if you have to return the game? Or even worse, play a few hours of the game only to find out that it is censored, and then you're stuck with the game and can't return it. If that happened to anyone in this case, they just wasted $27. I honestly do not think saving 10% on a game is worth the risk. Then again, I'm usually not one to play a game right after it releases, so I am a little biased on that opinion. You can do what I'm doing and buy every Nintendo-published game used so they're not seeing any of your money from it. I'm doing the same thing for games that are game keycards and games that require online, but that's a discussion for another video. By the way, these tips aren't just for Nintendo. Whenever another company tries to pull this type of shit, we need to let them know how unhappy we are with their shitty decisions. Honestly, if more gamers pulled together when Visa and MasterCard forced Steam and itch.io to remove games, we might not be in the situation we're in right now. And in case you were wondering, if a company like Visa or MasterCard pulls shit like that again, the best thing to do is just start using cash. If millions of people stopped using their credit cards, those companies would lose tons of money, which would get their attention real quick, since money is the only way to get corporations' attention. But I'm getting off track here, as that isn't exactly related to Nintendo, but it was related to censorship in the gaming industry. A quick side note, if you have elsewhere you can play the game and want to buy it, you should absolutely buy it and play it elsewhere. Make sure you don't punish the game because of this. This is a decision made by Nintendo, not the developers. So yeah, that was my rant bitching about how fucked up this entire situation is, and also my displeasure with Nintendo. If you enjoyed this content, feel free to hit like and subscribe, because I'll never shy away from calling out Nintendo's bullshit. Until next time, take care, mates.